Welcome to Blackman Folk Tales. Kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also like and share. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell, as this means the whole world to us. The rain always seemed to fall harder in Riverton's red light district, as if the heavens themselves mourned the souls who wandered its streets. Amelia Rose stood beneath a flickering neon sign, her umbrella long broken, her spirit long weary. She wasn't born for this life, no one ever truly was, but life had a cruel way of pushing people where they swore they'd never go. Once she had been a girl who dreamed of painting sunsets and opening a small art studio. Her laughter had filled the tiny apartment she shared with her mother, and her notebooks had been full of color and promise. But that was before her father vanished with another woman and her mother fell sick, the kind of sickness poverty never forgave. Amelia tried everything, waitressing, washing clothes, scrubbing floors, but when her mother's breathing grew shallow and her savings ran out, the shadows called to her. She told herself it would only be for a night. One night became a month became a way of life. Now, at 23, she was one of the many nameless faces who existed between guilt and survival. She'd long since stopped counting how many men had taken pieces of her soul in exchange for crumpled bills. But somewhere inside, beneath the filth of her choices, a fragment of innocence still whispered, softly, stubbornly, that she was made for something more. It was on a particularly cold December night that Amelia met him, the man who would change everything, though not in the way she expected. His name was Daniel Reed, a traveling musician with soft eyes and calloused hands. Unlike the others, he didn't look at her with hunger. When he approached her corner, she expected the usual negotiation, but instead he said gently, "You look cold." His voice was calm, genuine, the kind that disarmed her defenses before she could rebuild them. He bought her a cup of coffee from the vendor across the street, and they sat in silence for a while, watching the rain tap against the window pane. He asked about her art, her dreams, her favorite color, questions no one had asked in years. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally, his gaze steady but kind. "You don't belong in a place that feeds on people's brokenness." Amelia laughed bitterly. "Belonging is a luxury people like me can't afford." Daniel didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and handed her a small silver cross on a chain. "This won't fix anything," he said softly, "but maybe it can remind you that you're not beyond grace." His words struck something deep inside her, a place she'd thought was long dead. She wanted to believe him, to believe that grace could still find her. But when dawn came, he was gone, disappearing as quietly as he'd appeared, leaving behind nothing but the silver cross and the echo of hope she didn't know how to hold. Weeks later, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. At first, she laughed, an empty, bitter laugh that turned into sobs that shook her body. It couldn't be, she told herself. But it was. The doctor's words confirmed what her trembling hands already knew. The first emotion was fear. The second, confusion. But as days turned into weeks and she began to feel the tiny stirrings of life within her, something shifted. For the first time in years, her world wasn't just about survival. It was about creation. About love. She would sit at night, her hands over her stomach, whispering apologies and promises to the child who couldn't yet hear her. "You'll never know this life," she vowed. "You'll be more than I ever was." Still, she knew the streets were no place to raise a child. The nights grew colder, the whispers crueler, the clients rougher. When she looked at her reflection, she saw two people, the woman she had become and the mother she wanted to be, and they could not coexist. So one stormy night, as thunder roared across Riverton, Amelia wrapped her newborn son in a soft blanket, pressed her lips against his forehead, and walked through the rain to a small countryside church miles away. She placed him on the steps beneath the glowing cross, her tears mingling with the rain. The note she left beside him said only, "His name is Gabriel. Please give him what I never could, love." As lightning lit the sky, she whispered, "Forgive me," and vanished into the darkness. She didn't know that the child she left behind would one day carry her name on his lips, not in shame but in grace. The night Amelia left her child at the church, she felt something inside her die. The rain soaked through her dress, the cold clung to her bones, but it was nothing compared to the emptiness within. Every step she took away from that doorstep felt like a betrayal, yet she didn't turn back. She couldn't. The echo of her own footsteps followed her through the darkness like a curse. She wandered for hours until she reached the train station at Riverton's edge. Her money was barely enough for a ticket, but she didn't care where the train went, anywhere was better than here. When the train screeched into motion, she pressed her forehead against the glass, watching the raindrops race each other down the window pane. Her reflection stared back, hollow eyes, trembling lips, a soul lost somewhere between guilt and surrender. For the first time in years she prayed not for herself, but for the tiny boy wrapped in that old blanket. "God, don't let him hate me," she whispered into the hum of the moving train. "Let him live the life I couldn't." But even as she prayed, she knew forgiveness was a distant dream, a word that didn't belong to women like her. She arrived in a small town miles away, a place where no one knew her name or her past. The townsfolk called it Hollow Creek, a quiet place with cobblestone streets and kind faces that smiled without asking questions. Amelia rented a tiny room above a bakery run by an elderly widow named Mrs. Langford, who treated her with a gentleness she didn't know how to accept. In the mornings, the smell of fresh bread filled the air, and sometimes Amelia would help knead the dough, her hands trembling as though relearning what it meant to create instead of destroy. But nights were the hardest. That was when memories returned, Daniel's soft voice, her mother's dying breath, the weight of her son's tiny hand when she'd held him for the last time. The silver cross Daniel had given her still hung around her neck, cold and unyielding, as if reminding her of a grace she couldn't reach. One evening, as she sat by the window sketching the church she'd left Gabriel at, tears blurred the charcoal lines. "What kind of mother leaves her child?" she murmured. The answer came in silence, but deep down she knew, the kind who loves too much to let him suffer. Still, love did not ease the ache. It only made it heavier. As weeks turned to months, Amelia found solace in painting again. The townspeople began to notice her work, the haunting portraits, the stormy skies, the faceless figures walking through rain. They said her art carried something sacred, something sorrowful yet beautiful. Mrs. Langford encouraged her to sell them, and for the first time in years, Amelia began to earn an honest living. Yet no amount of success could silence the voice that haunted her each night, the cry of a baby she'd never hold again. On the anniversary of the night she left him, Amelia walked back to the same countryside church. She stood at a distance, hidden among the trees, watching as a kind-looking priest carried a toddler in his arms. The boy's laughter echoed through the night, piercing her heart like light through shattered glass. She wanted to run to him, to hold him, to whisper that she was his mother. But she couldn't. She turned away before her tears betrayed her. As she walked back into the shadows, she realized her life would forever be a silent prayer, one whispered for a son who would never know her name. Yet even as pain consumed her, a strange peace began to settle, the kind that comes when a soul stops fighting what cannot be undone. Gabriel grew beneath the soft glow of faith and the quiet hum of hymns. Father Matthews, the priest who found him crying beneath the church's cross that stormy night, raised him as his own. "You are a miracle, child," the priest often said, his weathered hands resting gently on the boy's curls. "You were left beneath grace, and grace will never leave you." The church became Gabriel's world, its bells, its pews, its echoing prayers. He learned to read from worn-out Bibles and painted saints' faces with colors borrowed from sunlight. The villagers adored him. He had a gentleness that seemed too old for his years and an unshakable curiosity about the world. Yet sometimes late at night, when the wind whispered through the stained-glass windows, Gabriel would ask, "Father, who was she?" The priest would always hesitate. "She was someone who loved you enough to let you go." Those words comforted him for a time, but as he grew older, love and loss became questions that no scripture could fully answer. By the time Gabriel turned 16, the church could barely contain his dreams. He was tall, bright-eyed, and drawn to the world beyond the chapel walls. Father Matthews grew weaker with age, but his faith in the boy's destiny never wavered. "You have your mother's heart," he said one morning as the sun streamed through the altar windows. Gabriel froze. "You knew her?" The priest smiled sadly. "Not as you wish I did. But I saw her once from a distance. She stood beneath that old oak watching you play. Her eyes carried both heaven and heartbreak." Gabriel's throat tightened. He wanted to ask more, but the priest simply placed the silver cross, the same one Daniel had given Amelia, into his palm. "She left this for you." The moment Gabriel touched it, something stirred deep within him, a strange mix of sorrow, warmth, and belonging. From that day forward he wore it always, believing it was the link between who he was and where he came from. And though he knew nothing of the man who had given it, nor the woman who had worn it before him, he felt their ghosts walking beside him, whispering purpose into his path. Years later, after Father Matthews passed peacefully in his sleep, Gabriel stood before the church that had raised him and made a vow. "I will find her," he whispered, clutching the cross. "Not to blame her, but to tell her I forgive her." The world beyond Hollow Creek was vast and cruel, but he ventured into it with the same quiet courage his mother once had. He worked odd jobs, played music in the streets, and painted portraits that caught the attention of strangers. One day, as fate would have it, a gallery owner noticed his work, the same haunting beauty Amelia's paintings had carried years ago. She invited him to exhibit in Riverton, the city where it all began. Gabriel didn't know it yet, but his footsteps were tracing his mother's path, back through the rain, back through the pain, toward a truth that had waited years to be found. And somewhere, in a small rented room above a bakery, an older, weary Amelia was still painting the same storm she once lived through, unaware that Grace was finally leading her son back home. Thank you for watching. Kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as this means a lot to us.